All right. Welcome into another day of your daily Devo. My name is Pastor Rick, and we're jumping into another part of John chapter 1. We're going to, good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, we're going to hit verses 6 through 18 today. So, man, just give me a round of applause for covering so many verses. I know that you've become accustomed to sometimes you dial in and you're like, is he going to make it past one verse today? I don't know. So we're going to give it a shot. Excuse me. So here we go. John chapter 1 verses 6 through 18. And just in case you didn't hear that, there's the screen to tell you. So verse 6, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. So this is talking about John the Baptizer. He wasn't actually identified necessarily with the Baptist denomination. So sometimes people, like a lot of times when I grew up, we just grew up calling him John the Baptist because he baptized people. So he was the Baptist. But he didn't actually have official membership in any Baptist churches, and so we call him John the Baptizer just for fun. He came as a witness to testify about the light so that all might believe through him. And then as I was looking at those two verses, just the importance of testifying about your faith and about who Jesus is in your life, because we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And so just to ask yourself the question, when's the last time that you testified to people about Jesus? When is the last time you just openly shared about what Jesus is doing on the inside of you, what he has changed in you, how he has impacted you? I can actually think of a couple of times recently where I have been able to share with someone just the impact of my relationship with Jesus on my actual everyday life. And so I just think that has a lot of power because, again, it's a part of the puzzle that people can't really argue with. Like, you tell people about how Jesus has changed your life, they can't be like, well, that's not true, that's unverified. No, it is true. It's true. And again, the reason that we testify about Jesus is so that all may believe. Things are crazy around us, right? Like, the world is going crazy. But what's not changing, what's not going away is that Jesus is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He's the fairest of 10,000. He's the bright and morning star. He's the hope for people. People need to know about Jesus. So let's give some extra focus to testifying about Jesus. Any opportunity that you get. It's not just for John the Baptizer. All right. Verse 8, he was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. So don't get it mixed up in your head, all right? Like, you're not the light. Jesus is the light. So let's make sure that we're consistently testifying about Jesus, that he's the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. Verse 9, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. Verse 10, he was in the world, and the world was created through him. Again, just kind of further establishing who Jesus is. And yet the world did not recognize him. So he was in the world, and the world was created through him, and yet the world did not recognize him. Who dat? Who are you? Verse 11, he came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. Recognizing is the first step, but it's not enough. And the world obviously struggled to recognize that he was the Messiah. He was the one. But then his own people, the Jews, did not receive him. This is about allegiance and receiving his kingly reign in our lives. That's what receiving him would have implied, because it's faith. They didn't have faith in him. They didn't basically swear their allegiance to his kingship. because they didn't believe. It's not like they didn't believe that he existed, because they talked to him, and some of the crazy religious leaders even organized his crucifixion. But they certainly didn't receive his kingly reign into their lives. Verse 12, but to all who did receive him, he gave them the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name. Verse 13 is who were born not of natural descent or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. So this is not about it's not about physical birth. It's not about national descent. That's not what matters. It's establishing that the door is wide open to the Gentiles, because that would have been a little unclear at the point of this writing. It's any who believe. So on one hand, Christianity, like relationship with Jesus, is very narrow, because it's one way Jesus, like he's the way, he's the truth, he's the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. However, it's the most inclusive religion, if you will, that you could ever find, because the door is literally open to everyone. All you have to do is receive Jesus' kingly reign into your life. Recognize that he is not just a king, but he's your king. And all that implies in our lives. That's why repentance is so critical, because you come and become a part of a kingdom. You learn the ways of the king, and you follow the leadership of the king, and you do the bidding of the king. You do what he says. That's what it's all about. It's about obedience to Jesus, our King, because we are a part of his kingdom. We've been made a part. And I love verse 12. It says, it gave them the right to be children of God. Now, it is a privilege, it is an honor, it is a blessing, but he gave us the right to be children of God. That is awesome. Like, he paid all the price. So the legal portion of this process, he gave us the right. And all we have to do is receive his kingly reign to walk in that. In verse 14 says, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. We observed his glory, the glory as the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth, full of grace and truth, full of grace and truth. Now, I love this verse. So the word became flesh. So he took on actual human flesh, and he dwelt among us. That word dwelt is the same word as tabernacled. So even as John is writing this and talking about how Jesus came in the flesh, kind of doing away with some of the the Gnostic lies that Jesus was just an apparition or a spirit or like a pseudo being, like he wasn't actual flesh and bone. No, John's coming to say, no, he came in flesh and he tabernacled among us. And when he uses that word, that he tabernacled among us, it pulls up pictures in the Jewish mind of the tent of meeting, the tabernacle where God met with his people, where God's presence came and dwelt on earth among his people. And so that's what Jesus came to say, like, no, I'm the one. I'm the one that was all pointing to. So he's saying, like, I came and I tabernacled among you to help show you the truth, that I'm the one, painting a clear picture to the Jewish audience that Jesus is God, that he's come to fulfill all of that ceremonial laws, all of those laws that to get into the presence of God. And Jesus says, hey, I came, tabernacle among you. Verse 15, John testified concerning him and exclaimed, this was the one of whom I said, the one is coming after me, ranks ahead of me, because he existed before me. Now, biologically, John the Baptizer, was older than Jesus. But he's clear with this point. He existed before me. So he's referring to the fact that Jesus has always existed. He's eternal. So he's God, because God's the only one that is eternal. Now, he's created us to be eternal beings going forward. Like, yes, we will be, we don't ever die. Like, our physical bodies will die, but in the resurrection, then we will be resurrected to eternity. But he's referring to eternal past and, future. That there's no created point for Jesus. Like, he's always existed. So he's saying he existed before me because he's God. So he's, again, just in this prologue of the book of John, he is making it so clear Jesus is God. So let's make sure that we give him the attention and the focus that he deserves. Verse 16, indeed, we have received grace upon grace from his fullness. Man, just meditate on this verse today and just receive grace from God today, unmerited favor, and the supernatural empowerment of the Holy Spirit to do all the things, to do all the things that he has called you to do all the things that are in front of you. Receive grace upon grace, abundant grace, more grace. He gives grace to the humble. Come and humble yourself before the Lord and receive that grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The law was given through Moses, and grace and truth. So truth does not stop existing. No, like, truth needs to be understood, needs to be addressed, needs to be communicated. But grace comes with it through Jesus Christ. And no one has ever seen God, the one and only Son, who is himself God. So again, clear. Like John is saying, hey, Jesus is God, period, end of story. And he's not a God, he's the God. And that's going to come right here, because it says who is himself God and is at the Father's side, he has revealed him. So that's going to the first part of the verse. No one has ever seen him, God, but Jesus has revealed him, because he's like the physical human body, like, revelation of who God is. So it's great to, as we go through any of the Gospels and we just read about what Jesus did, how he talked, what he said, it's so important for us to pay attention to it, because he is the revelation of the Father. He's the revelation of the Father. And so we get to know God best by watching who Jesus is. Not who Jesus was, because he's still alive, y'all. So it's just who Jesus is. What he has done, what he is doing, what he's going to do is a revelation of who God is. So with that, a big hearty God bless you today. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop in the comments something that stuck out to you, something you appreciated about these verses, and I will see you tomorrow.